I've never done this before. I said to somebody, I know how to stand up and present and teach and speak, but I don't know how to stand up here and even read my own words. I have read and read to make sure I'm pronouncing everything properly. It's just been so bizarre. So anyway, I'll give it my best shot. But first of all, Katie, you were magnificent. Wow. Thank you. And goodness, don't we love malaprops?
Yeah.
Many. Thanks for coming. It's really fun to see you all. As COVID was ending, the Enneagram was really becoming popular in some really fine ways and not so fine ways. It is a system that is both simple and accessible and very complex, but the complexity eluded a lot of people. And I just got a little disgusted with some things about how it was being spoken of and used. So I guess I began writing this book as a way to show some of the complexity of the system, I think I would say. And I wanted to also make the point that we can't use the Enneagram unless we know how to be present. And so the first chapter in this book is on presence. Because if I'm not here, if I'm not present to myself, then I'm not available to me and I can't self-observe. And if I can't observe myself, then I don't know the patterns that I'm engaging in that are limiting my life. And so this book is, for various reasons, one of the things is that I wanted to make clear is this is a map. The system is a map. It's really not a typology. And people tend to stop there. And then it becomes a fun game. But it's actually, for those who want to use it, a map that shows us the automatic patterns of our ego structure. Now that's quite a map to have. I have a map of me now that shows me, tells me how I trip myself up. So when I'm present, you get Sandra. Because when we're present with ourselves or in presence, type recedes. There is no type. When I'm not, you get the automatic patterns of type 8. Now both can be fun to be around, but lately I'm hoping more of me shows up. So the first chapter really sets the stage about how important presence is. So in addition to that, the book is unique in some other ways. Now I'm going to have to read some things. This was feeling so good, and now I'm going to try to read like this. So we learn the Enneagram as a way of deepening our compassion for ourselves and for other people. So one of the unique features of this book is that I've included at least 2 and sometimes 3 compassionate entry points. So for those of us who love a 9, there are some compassionate entry points that we want to understand so that we can be more compassionate to that particular type. So I'll start there and read you what I mean by a compassionate entry point. One of the painful inner narratives that minimizes type 9 is this. What if I show up, name my wants, and I'm ignored? An unconscious false belief that I don't matter is a core fear, and 9s develop a sensitivity to being dismissed. This fear of being neglected sets nines up to neglect themselves, believing that if I ignore me first, it'll hurt less than if others ignore me. So that inner struggle to know that is a compassionate entry point. And the way we use that is that we make sure we remember, we include, we ask nines opinions. They can hide from us sometimes. And so that's an example of a compassionate entry point that's in each type chapter. So part one is presence, and then the next two chapters, man, chapter 2 will just send you to the moon, I think. I just went into the components of the type, a lot of them, and then offered some practices and some questions to get some distance from that or to loosen the grip of it. You see, our Enneagram type is how we limit ourselves. We start in lockstep on these automatic patterns, and without this map, we don't know that's what's happening. So actually, when we're on automatic, we don't have a choice. We're just in knee-jerk response. But with the map, we see what they are, and we can step out of that more quickly. So chapter 2 has a lot of substance about that, and I hope you find it helpful, useful. In addition to talking about the psychology of the types, I'm also weaving the spiritual dimensions of the Enneagram into this. And I wanted to read you just a couple pieces on the spirituality piece that's in the book. A lot of books just do the psychology of the system, but actually, as Claudia taught it when he brought it here in the early 70s, he saw it as a spiritual tool to really get to know ourselves and become more available to ourselves and to divine love. My teacher in the Diamond Approach group is Sandra Smith, who did the foreword in this book. And I've asked Malaprop to have her book here. If you do not have the spiritual dimensions of the Enneagram, they have some for sale. It's been my Bible for a long time with the system, so I would highly recommend purchasing that. Okay. So in the spirituality in this book, I have what I call alchemy from type to essence. I have some Sabbath keeping practices by type, and I've written prayers for each type. And these prayers are different than the prayers if you got the workbook that goes with the podcast. There's some prayers in that. These are different. So here we go. Let me read you the alchemy from type to essence for type 4. Do we have any 4s in the room? Yes, we have some 4s. Yeah. All right. Holy source or holy origin is their enlightened spiritual perspective. So one of the primary illusions guiding this type is that they are separate from source. They have been abandoned and left on this planet of insensitive humans. Now, this highlights the 4's sensitivity to belonging or not. Feeling disconnected and misunderstood, 4's spend time seeking and longing for what isn't here. So shifting attention to what is here for which they are grateful allows them to see the world anew. When appreciation is the heart's posture, longing dissolves, and 4's discover that they are the ones they've been looking for. Nothing now is missing. Gratefulness gives rise to the virtue of equanimity, bringing a calm and steadiness that dissolves the illusion of abandonment. Holy origin or source is present, always has been, forever will be, and we are all intimately connected to it. In this knowing, all of life, the peaks, the valleys, and the in-between, are embraced in gratefulness. So comparing mind, which is pretty typical of type 4, when on automatic, that fades, making space for joy to emerge. 4s understand and know in their bones that they belong and reside in the fabric of life. Magnified perceptions transform into simple seeing as 4s find beauty in life's ordinariness. So, Sabbath keeping, I've written some practices for each type. And so I'll read from the 8th chapter. Do we have anybody, the best type 8 in there? You know, I've said that for years and everybody still laughs. So this day's rhythm is designed to soften the 8's intensity and dissolve the demands of lust. Lust fills time, rushes us toward the next task, project, person to assist, or whatever is desired now. Lust is about now. Having no deadline or agenda takes away the bait for lust. Hallelujah. There's nothing to make happen on Sabbath. Simply be receptive to what shows up. Now, there is an unconscious fear in 8s of inner deadness. So 8s amplify life, going for the gusto, doing whatever. And so right here in this piece of this chapter, I found the perfect Rumi quote. He says, "You are burning up your soul to keep the body delighted." And for much of my life, I could resonate with that, right? So Sabbath for 8s must include rest. Cook if you like, or read, but most of all, rest your body. Be gentle with your body and tender with your heart. A prayer that I'll read, it's a prayer for type 7. Ground of my being, you offer the completion that I seek. Gently guide me to the fulfillment that is awaiting me when I rest in the calm of present moment. Ease my planning mind and the ideas that overwhelm me. May my energy deepen rather than scatter me, so that I experience the gifts each moment offers that lead me to my wholeness. May I attune to my heart so that I feel my joy and also the richness of my sadness. Both bring me home to my deeper self, where I find the freedom to be me. In present moment, I discover that I am missing not one thing. So that's pretty typical of the kind of prayer that I've written for each type. And in this, I'm now in part 2. Part 1 was presence and introducing the components of the type structures. And part 2 has type-specific chapters for each of the 9 types. And I've used the word power in introducing each of these chapters. And many moons ago, I was reading the Book of Awakening by Mark Nepo. And in that book, he says, you know, we are defining power as the power to be able to. And the real definition, or the original definition, is the power to be. And he says, we suffer the difference. So in that spirit of the power to be, using the word power to be me, to be free to be me. And so each of the type chapters, and I'll start with 9, it's the power of claiming. That's the journey for that type. For 8, it's the power of opening. For 1, the power of accepting. For 3's the power of being. And for 2, the power of receiving. 4, the power of belonging. For 6, the power of trusting. For 5, the power of engaging. And for 7, the power of abiding. That's where we want to move toward. Can I have the courage to open as one who leads with 8? And in the book, I do make the point of saying we lead with the type because we're not our type. It's our ego structure that was formed between 5 and 7 years old. And by this time in our lives, those are pretty well-worn neural pathways. So now we have a map that shows us how that operates and how we can step out of it. This afternoon, I worked with a team in Atlanta, a wealth management team. I did a training for them last fall, and they decided they wanted to do type groups just to keep the information going. This is a team with a lot of 8s. What was the laugh about? And so it was hard because they were pretty much in the bravado. Pretty much in the bravado. And at the end, I just had to say, now you do realize that this is how we limit ourselves, right? And I think it's sunk in just a little bit. But we often fall in love with our type because we need it to survive. We need our ego to survive. But as Helen Palmer used to say, ego makes a very good ally, but a very bad governor. And so we want to use this map to wake ourselves up to a place where we can actually choose moment by moment what we will do, who we will be, and how. So as the book was forming in my mind, I knew, actually I was watching a Netflix documentary on Amy Tan, who wrote Joy Luck Club. And she was saying that she wrote the book because she wanted to tell her mother's story. And I am trained in the Narrative Enneagram Tradition, which means we learn by people sitting on panels and telling us what it's like to live in the skin of a type. So I thought, well, good grief, I've got to have companion voices. So I wanted 2 people of each type to write about their experience as that type. And I wanted to bring in diversity. So there are 19 guest writers or companion voices. One story is a mother-daughter, both of whom are 8s. And they tell their story of what it was like. The stories can be atypical, not your stereotypical story that you would imagine an 8 or a 9 or a 7 would write. All the writers are female-bodied, Black, brown, white, straight, lesbian, bisexual, non-binary, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, pagan, Christian. Yeah, I think that got it. Unitarian. I was getting to the U. And their stories really offer a lot of heart to the book. And I right before I was sending the manuscript off, I realized that I wanted to invite the readers to find themselves in each of these stories. Because throughout the book, I make the point that we are more alike than different. And sure, we have all 9 types within us. And then we have this default that's familiar and a comfort zone. It's where we go in stress because we seek the comfort zone. But there's no growth there, but it sure feels fine. So I'm really tickled that Claudia and Celeste could come tonight. I mean, you know, they've written in the book, they've shared their story, and now they came and they said, yeah, we'll do this. So I'm so grateful. And so each will share what this was like for her and maybe read some of what you wrote. And I think you'll love it. Okay, Claudia, you want to go first?
Well, buenas tardes, good evening. First of all, I would just like to thank Sandra, because when I moved here to Asheville 6 years ago to work at the Unitarian Universalist congregation, my first staff development was an Enneagram session with Sandra. And it was super helpful because we focused on our leadership style and the way we deal with conflict depending on what we lead with in the Enneagram. And so it has been a journey. Every year I take a class with her, and it has really helped me to deepen my understanding of this amazing map that in my case, I lead with a 1. Any 1s in the room? Woo-hoo! My kindred souls. So, you know, on that journey to acceptance, the map is helpful. But I'd like to go back a little bit because I scoffed at the idea of engaging at the Enneagram, and I didn't want to be defined by a type. But as I said, when I did my professional development, I was invited into this journey. And in my essay, I talked a little bit about this, and I wrote, when a professional development workshop revealed that I engaged as a 1, I wondered if someone had been following me around and taking notes. Organized, list maker, thorough, self-disciplined, feeling obligated to improve myself and the world. It was me. And of course, my shadow side too. Opinionated, impatient, rigid, perfectionistic, judgmental, critical of myself and others. Wow. Reading about my Enneagram type was a confirmation of things I knew about myself and an invitation to reflect on how those tendencies have guided me through rewarding and fulfilling experiences, as well as times of struggle and deep disappointment. And honestly, I find that when I think about myself leading with a 1, I think that there is a wonderfulness to it, O-N-E fullness to it. And I get a lot of my power from that. And there's also a lot of struggle. And one of the parts of the struggle for myself as a 1 is dualistic thinking that arises in the quest to improve myself and improve the world. And that leads to such rigidity that one of the things that I have done to kind of loosen that side of myself is to take improv classes. Has anyone taken improv? And so let me read to you a little bit about what I wrote about this experience. Improv has also been a fun way of releasing the need to know and prepare in advance. There's no way of knowing what one's scene partner is going to say, so responses cannot be rehearsed. I am expected to respond in the moment with no time for crafting the perfect response. That was very, very scary. Now, the improv yes and concept, and I even tattooed it. That was my seminary graduation gift to myself. The improv yes and concept helped me to move from black and white thinking to a more spacious awareness of the gray areas in life. By shifting to a yes and approach, I felt a shift in conversations as I acknowledged what was said without seeming judgmental, and added my thoughts on the matter for their consideration. And I'll give you an example. I served on the school board when I lived in Florida for 8 years, and I lived in a very conservative community, and I was often the minority perspective. And for the 8 years that I served on the school board, I was a but person, right? The team would say something, I'm like, but have you considered this? And I would like have all my little post-its and all my research, and I'd be telling them why they were wrong. And of course, nobody listened to me. But when I changed the strategy to, yes, I hear you, and have you considered, and I did that only my last year, it made all the difference in the world. And so I know that for me, even though it was a stretch, it was really transformative in how I engage, not only at work, but with my relationships, my spouse and my children, and it really does make a difference. Another thing about this is that when I was writing the essay, autocorrect would change improv to improve. And so the last thing I'd like to share of this journey on leading with a one, not being a one, as Sandra reminds us, is that it has also opened my awareness to how it's not just the type one leads with, right, but the life experiences that one has that shape us. And so I wrote a little bit about that because exploring the Enneagram has invited me to think about how much my type 1 tendencies have been influenced by my immigration experience. As a child, witnessing the treatment of my parents and myself as less than because we are Latine pushed me to want to do whatever it took to fit in, to work hard and get it right, to prove that I belonged. My parents had high expectations of us because they came to the United States so we could have a better life, go to college, and be successful. Plowing through 3 college degrees was one way of earning my worth. And as an aside, it is an MDiv, not an MD. Multitasking and being on a zillion boards, running for office, working full time, and caring for my family, well, they not only had to be done, but they had to be done perfectly. It has taken me years to let go of that mindset and recognize that I have worth without needing to prove it to anyone. My yearly Enneagram workshops have been a safe place to review my life story and shift the narrative to a more affirming, compassionate way of being and seeing myself. It has been a gift to connect with other type 1 women with whom I can relate and who are on the journey of knowing ourselves better so we can live to our potential and be a force for love in the world. Our oneness provides a common ground that creates openness and reminds me that I am not bound by my type. And as I was reading the book, I really appreciated all of the questions and the exercises, and I really took the Sabbath to heart. No schedules on my Sabbath, nothing programmed. Not always possible, but it's a work in progress. And I am super excited to continue on that journey and use Sandra's book along the way. Thank you.
y'all hear me? I like that a little bit taller, but that's okay. So I want to start by saying a big thank you to Sandra for the invitation to write for the book. I've known Sandra 20 years, and she and the Enneagram have changed and continue to change my life. So thank you very much, Sandra. And the peanut gallery back there, my husband, Carlton, thank you to him and to the other friends that I see in the room and then on the virtual connection too. Thank y'all for the years of love and support. Truly grateful. I lead with type 3. And as you may know from other 3s or from Sandra's description in the book, type 3s are upbeat, optimistic, and competent. I like the way that sounds. Also, Sandra says that we're inspirational in our ability to get things done and support others in accomplishing more than they think they can do. Shorthand for that, y'all, is human doings versus human beings. Our mantra is GSD, get stuff done. Here are 4 things that are true for me when I'm in the trance of type 3. Roles help me define myself, and expectations of the roles give me a list of stuff to do. When I get things done, people see me as good at my role, and they will love me for what I do. The world is a competitive place, and 3s like to win. The more efficient I am, the more I get done, and the more we win. It's all up to me. Succeed or fail, failure is to be avoided. So here's a favorite quote from the book about type 3s, and it's also a great lead-in for the part that I'm going to read from the book where I've written. Completing a task and crossing off the list is affirming for this type. This good feeling is a bit of an addiction for 3s until an external or internal force invites them or knocks them off the hamster wheel and into a still point. Sandra also says, in continuing their fast and efficient way of doing, 3s outrun their hearts. So for me, getting a breast cancer diagnosis at the age of 53 was this external force knocking me off the hamster wheel. And my heart caught up with me. As you'll hear, the 2 years following the diagnosis, which culminated in a failed reconstruction, wreaked havoc with crossing things off my list. It upended my view of success and failure. It made me rage against the society's expectation of beauty. And it challenged my self-image. So now, some excerpts from the part I wrote of chapter 7. Breast cancer is in my family, lots of it. So much so that I never questioned if I would get breast cancer, just when. Yearly mammograms had been part of my routine for over a decade. My plan, catch it, conquer it, move on. My mammogram in April had been clear, but my annual checkup in December, my doctor found a suspicious spot, sent me for another mammogram, which led to a biopsy, which I was in the waiting room to hear about. Alone, I waited in the lobby, stunned. This cannot be real. It was real, very real. Left mastectomy, chemo, drugs, continuing to work, bald head, pain, radiation, still working, fatigue, chest expander, reconstruction implant surgery, and the scar that did not heal. Was this my fault? I was sure there was something about me after all the cancer shit I'd endured, survived, and conquered that caused this epic fail. Regardless of how much the surgeon said that there was nothing I could have done, differently. I spent hours replaying the days up to the implant surgery and the days after. Was I not careful enough? Was I incapable of taking it easy? Should I have only slept on my back, eaten more protein, exercised less? My inner 3 voice was relentless, creating the duality of success and failure and shouting the illusion, it's all up to me. Why did the thought of not having a left breast make me feel less than? On this emotional roller coaster, I got mad at how messed up it is that so much self-esteem and self-worth can be tangled up in a bulging slab of flesh and mammary glands, even after they've served their purpose of nursing babies. When did I buy into the societal message that woman equals 2 breasts, and the more dangerous message, gorgeous, vital, vibrant woman equals 2 perky breasts? On some level, I must have believed it to have put myself through the reconstruction ordeal. How did I get so brainwashed? Extraction, Friday morning, 7:45 a.m. Plastic surgeon's office for the implant removal surgery. Lots of medication. I don't remember that day. The scar. Late Saturday night, when everyone was in bed, I took off the bandage. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. It took my breath away. Not the flat, straight scar I'd expected. Instead, the tissue was lumpy, folded over, swirls of skin wrinkled around a deep purple cavern where the implant had been. The drain tube protruded through my skin into an opaque plastic bulb pinned to the surgical bra. I looked in the mirror in disbelief. Nothing on the internet showed such disfigurement, scars so misshapen and grotesque. I realized I would see that scar every day I looked in the mirror, every shower, every time I changed my clothes for the rest of my life. Despair. The days following surgery were some of the darkest, hardest, saddest I can remember. I was depleted from months of struggle, working hard to reframe hard things, thinking I could beat this, trying to keep a positive outlook. I was so sad. Sad to see my poor, disfigured, mutilated chest. The folds of skin looked like Star Wars Jabba the Hutt had taken up residency. My image of being whole and healthy, feminine and worthy, now gone. Who am I now? You get the book and read.
As I said, the stories have heart. Yeah. And, you know, Celeste, you gave us a real insight into type 3 because of, I mean, you know, there's a need to succeed and win, but if something goes awry, 3s take it on as if it's their fault. And we don't hear that often or read that often in the literature. So thanks for making that point in the book. Yeah. So we're going to leave time for comments and questions. And I just wanted to say one more thing and give you some a little taste of the last chapter in the book. But both Claudia and Celeste talked about striving in a particular way, specific to their own type. And so the last chapter is about resisting and allowing. And of course, when we strive, we're not really allowing, and it takes us further away from the courageous opening that we all need. So that last chapter really is about the body as a container for alchemy, for that shift from vice to virtue, fear to love. And I have a process that I've named the pause process in that chapter that can move us step by step through an emotion or an energy. The book closes with blessings for each of the types. I will not read those, so as Celeste says, buy the book. But I did close with a blessing for readers that I wrote years ago when my friend Mary Ann's daughter was heading off to college, and they had a party, and I wrote it for her. So I thought, well, by golly, I'll just use this again. In the choreography of your life yet to come, may your giving and receiving be balanced. May a song of delight sing daily in your heart's depths. May you know the world as a generous and abundant place. And may love guide you more than fear. In the last sentence, may love be our legacy. So we'll do some question and comment and take questions. So we'll just sit on these little perches here and see how that feels. And I also just want to say thank you folks on Zoom who are here virtually for coming and being a part of this. We can't see you, but I'm sensing you. So thank you for making time. Yeah. So Katie, are we good to start?
Absolutely. I don't have any virtual questions yet, but live audience, raise your hands and let's start.
We're perching. We're ready.
What is it Kamala says? She says, what you got?
To my face.
I'll stop and see how that sounds. So I've got a question for Claudia and for Celeste. As you both have contributed to Sandra's books, is there any interest in writing your own?
No.
Maybe a collection of sermons.
I have a lot of respect for people who write books and the whole process of becoming an author and getting something published. And so I'm very pleased to have tagged along to Sandra's success.
I'm glad you did.
Did you?
Kelsey.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, all three of you. I'm sitting back here tearing up as I leave with type 8. So you just being you is, giving me the gift of opening my heart. So thank you. I'm curious, just in the process of this project and doing this collectively together, what was something that surprised you?
You'll be the cleanup hitter, Sandra.
I think, did you want us to repeat the question? So do that, Sandra.
So Kelsey asked, in the process of engaging in this book, what surprised you? All right.
I was surprised at how hard it was reliving. I mean, because it's been a decade. Well, 2023 was a decade since the surgery and all that. And so it was really more trauma than, it's like, whoa, yeah, that was me. Because I feel like as a 3, often I don't stop to savor and stop to process because there's so much on my list, gotta keep going. So it was incredibly powerful to relive it.
Yeah, and I think for me it was like do I need to?
For me, it was really, that invitation to reflection and really sitting with it and going beyond the type, the the good and the not so good and looking at the complexity of it. I think I kind of simplified it, and I just, when Sandra asked me, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. But it was a wonderful invitation to really some deep reflection, for which I'm grateful.
Thank you. Kelsey, I think what surprised me, two things. That everyone said yes, except for a couple people. And 2s, 5s, and 8s are rejection sensitive types. And so I braced a lot, needlessly. And the yeses were such gifts. And the other surprise was how beautiful the stories were and are. And I just felt so lucky for their yeses and the gift of their life experience shared. Yeah.
One of the cool things Sandra said, she said specifically to me, talk about breast cancer and how that stretched you, how that challenged your type, your kind of the trance of type. I was like, okay, I haven't looked at it that way. And so that was a neat window, even though it was hard.
Did you have prompting questions for all your writers?
No. No control. But it was a guide to share yourself as one who leads with this type, and how you've grown beyond some of the patterns. Virginia or Courtney?
You go.
Okay, we need to know what types all are.
Not 8s.
No, we're 3s.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
She really wants me to go. Okay. I'm really touched by the prayers, and I would love to know how it seems like such a beautiful integration of so much of what you bring, and just how you tapped in, how you listened. Did you meditate? Did they come to you? Like, how did you actually write? Were you praying as you wrote them? How did that come?
So for those who are here virtually, Courtney's asking, how did the prayers come? Is that good enough?
That's good enough.
Thank you for your question. It's bringing back actually the sensations of those moments in my body. So the assert types, 3s, 7s, and 8s, we can outrun our hearts. That's our least accessible brain in the 3 centers of intelligence. So what I found in writing, and one of the readers was very good at saying, you're being too direct here, now just soften it. But that I tended to get very present with myself. And then I have some methods of going receptive. And in the first chapter, when I talk about presence, it's getting present and then going receptive, and then presence arises. And I didn't write those prayers unless I was in presence. And they came. Yeah, thanks, Courtney.
I thought there was a dueling.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. Virginia?
I've just forgotten my question.
That's all right. That's all right. Jerry?
Yeah, do you think there's a connection between astrological signs and Enneagram types?
So the question, is there a connection between astrology and Enneagram? And, I'm not sure I can speak to that, Jerry, but what I do know is when I had my birth chart done, truth was all over my chart. And that's my holy idea or enlightened spiritual perspective. So I think wisdoms come together in particular ways. Yeah. Did you remember?
Yes, I did. What would y'all each say? It seems like you're talking to folks who know this. A lot of people who are familiar with the system. So what would you say has been your best way of continuing to work with this, right? After you kind of find out the type that you're leading with and all that. What's each of, I don't know if that's type specific, and that sounds like part of what your book is about. I'm just curious from the three of y'all.
So how are each of us working to grow?
Yeah, what's most helpful for each of you in continuing to work with them?
What's helpful in continuing to work with the Enneagram for each of us?
I'll go first because I talked about it a little bit in my essay. And for me, it's really been once a year doing a class with Sandra, and she does it on the triads, on different aspects of Enneagram, which I find helpful. So for me, it's like that ongoing process, and it is a wonderful map. And in the book, one of the practices, for example, is curiosity for ones that tend to be rigid, and that's one of the practices that I'm embracing. So it's ongoing.
For me as a 3, paying attention to when I'm in go mode. And in the book, Sandra talks about that 3s can know when they're on because they don't take deep breaths. And Sandra and I have been friends for a long time, and she used to come up to me and goes, "When's the last time you took a deep breath?" And I would go, "Yesterday." I mean, that was the degree that stress had just balled me up, and it was all about doing. And so being conscious of that. And so now, y'all, I retired a year ago, and it was like, oh. So anyway, now like every day I take a deep breath. I know, and at least one. I mean, and it's the coolest thing. And yeah, so just reminding myself of those things that can show when I'm in that trance of type, and my friends and family, it was just like I always want to do things for them, and have a list. And here's the beginning of the day. So on Sunday we watched golf. We watched golf, and I was sitting there, and it was all I could do to sit and watch golf. But I did it, and I kept thinking, this is what it feels like to do anything.
And she enjoyed it.
And I enjoyed it. So anyway, so just kind of reminding myself and not having the huge to-do list of when I was working, super helpful.
So usually each year I pick some component of my type to work with. And so the worldview has been one, and now I look for ways that I get carried. And of course, what we look for, we find. And that's a big deal. Where you're placing your attention, you'll always find it. 6 will always find where the trouble is. 4s will always see what's missing, if that's what we're scanning for. So I've been looking for ways that I get carried, and it's just all over the place. Though I didn't get a parking space right in front of Malaprop. And the other practice that I'm working with is later, because lust is a drivenness to do something now. And it pulls my body up really fast. It's an energy that comes up very fast. For those of you who know me, you've seen that. I'm sorry. But when I feel my body do that inner jerk, I just lean back. So I'm trying to teach myself later. Thank you, Virginia. And I think we're out of, yes, you have a question from virtual group?
One more question in closing sentences.
Okay. Is there anyone on YouTube Zoom? Okay,
They're
that's.
sending lots of love. They really like you.
One more question, anyone?
Well, what about final thoughts before we end the event this evening?
Now, what does that mean?
When you buy Sandra's book, there's good stuff in there, and you can read a few pages, and then you kind of go, okay, need a minute. So it's not a speed read, and it's one you can go back to in beautiful ways, and even the same thing that you read the day before, the week before, will have new insights. It's a beautiful book. I highly recommend it. Final thoughts. That's my final answer.
Yeah, and I can't say enough about the inquiries, the questions, the reflections. The Sabbath section is awesome for every type. It's really well done.
Thank you. Wow, I'm just feeling gratefulness. That's just my final thought. It's just a huge thank you to so many in this room. Thank you. Thank you, Malaprops. Katie, it's all yours now.